Hey, Low Code Approach listeners, this is Wendy Haddad. Before we jump into this week's episode, I wanted to let you know that we are starting to plan for the next season, and we want to make sure we hear from you on what is most important and relevant in terms of the topics that we'll be choosing. So if you could open a web browser and pop over to aka.ms/low code topic request, that's aka.ms/low code topic request, all one word. Fill out that brief survey on what topics and what subjects, what guests you might want to hear from. And who knows, maybe it'll make it into the next season of the podcast. Thanks so much and happy listening. Welcome to the Low Code Approach. I am Wendy Haddad. I am not our illustrious host, Sean Feeney. He is currently out today, but I'm Wendy Haddad, a senior cloud solution architect, delivery lead, and a former Microsoft customer. And I am joined by the illustrious Dr. No. Introduce yourself, Ken.
I'm going to start off as Sean does. Hey, everybody. My name's Ken Aguillard, Principal Program Manager here at Microsoft. And it's quick story time. I was at a conference a few months back, and I ran into this lovely young lady, and I kept looking at her and talking to her, and like, I know this person. I really do. I just can't place it. And then all of a sudden, it dawned on me, it was Laura Rogers. And I'm like, MVP and trainer and just all around Microsoft professional extraordinaire. Laura, how are you today? Who are you? What do you do? Why are you here? Let's talk.
Thanks for having me, Ken. Yeah, it was great meeting you in person a couple months ago. I started off in SharePoint. I've been doing SharePoint for about 20 years, and I've been an MVP for about 14 years. And my specialty is not just SharePoint, but building business solutions. So I love automating business processes, Power Apps, Power Automate, the whole Power Platform, and helping really like end users and power users be able to empower them to be able to learn how to build their own business processes without having to learn programming.
So you've had this background of training. Were you formally educated in how to train? Did you kind of fall into training and upskilling people? Like, what's that journey? I'm curious.
Actually, my degree is in kinesiology, which has nothing to do with any of this.
I love that.
One of my first office jobs, my first IT job, I decided that the people in the office weren't really using the email correctly and doing things like they didn't really know kind of the best way to do things the most efficient way. So I just took it upon myself to start doing training classes every Friday. And okay, everybody's coming to this conference room and I'm going to teach you Outlook, or I'm going to teach you Word. And so that's where I kind of just started taking it upon myself to make sure just that people are using all these products in the best way and they know the most efficient way. And so I worked at other consulting companies. Now I have my own company. It's called IW Mentor. But at those consulting companies, I would be creating training programs and doing online classes. So I just that's been part of what I've always done in the 25 years or so that I've been in IT. And so I love having my own company, IW Mentor. It's all online courses, self-paced courses, and we have interactive sessions where we do questions and things. So yeah, I love helping those end users and power users.
So I'll maybe ask the question, do you think you sort of fell into technology, or tech as a way of transforming people's lives, Laura, and giving them fresh new careers? So I'm going to ask the question, do you kind of miss kinesiology or,
No. This is kind of funny because my husband and I were just talking about this last night and about just this weird path. So I always loved programming. So even in third grade, and this was, 1980 or so, learning like little coding things. And then in seventh grade, learning basic in DOS interfaces. And I loved it. And I always loved the logic. Like logic is my favorite thing. So I think I was just destined to end up in IT because every job that I've had, even like office jobs, I would find a way to automate my job and figure out macros and workflows. And so I've always gravitated towards anything involving logic, really.
Well, it actually makes sense. My husband's a doctor of physical therapy, so kinesiology background as well. And you have to understand how systems work as a whole, but you need to break it down into smaller pieces. Let's start this. Let's kind of talk about your philosophy of training, how you approach training a tool in general. And then we can go to AI specifically, because things have changed, right, with our world and new technologies. So when you have a new technology, how do you approach building a training program or a course or something else?
Oh, that's interesting you asked that. I just recently started building a Copilot course for my online classes. And the way I think about it is I think about my audience. I think about my people, my end users and power users, and I think about their perspective. Even though I have a background in server admin, I kind of came from being like an Exchange admin. Even though my background is a little bit more technical, I like to think about it through their eyes. And so I built really just like Microsoft 365 Copilot training videos, just how to open Word and how to do prompts and how to do kind of more of like getting the adoption of those end users that have Copilot in their organizations. And so that's the perspective that I always look at it from. Like, okay, if I've never heard of this technology, it's really hard sometimes to step back that far when you've been doing something for 20 years to say, if I've never heard of SharePoint, what does that look like? How do you explain it to somebody? So it's kind of interesting, like that ability to be able to step way back and explain something. But that's what I start with is who is the audience and how are they going to look at this and how are they going to understand it?
Are you finding that there's a difference between training people in AI and AI tools and your historical training, right? On how to use SharePoint or Exchange or Outlook or something else? What has that generally been for you?
Yeah, that is a little bit different because a lot of what AI is learning how to write prompts. So learning how to think about it in prompts. So no matter what technology you're in, all the different AI technologies, Copilot, and if you're working on Power Apps in Copilot or Word in Copilot, no matter what you're doing, you just have to be able to think about what your prompt is and how to be able to get the most out of your prompt. So it's actually more simple because that carries across all the different technologies once you kind of get the hang of that. And just kind of remember that it's there really too.
Do you have to sometimes personalize training or adjust your training to maybe the individual? Let's say perhaps a specific business or industry. Do you have to adjust the training for that?
Not usually per a business or industry. It's usually training usually needs to be adjusted per the current level of the students, of what they already know, and then be able to take it from there and start at that level and progress. So it's usually less around what the industry is.
I'm glad you said that. So now I have a great follow-up question, at least in my mind it is. Since, as Wendy said, AI is very, very new. How do you maybe help to dispel some of the myths or fears that may be associated with learning about AI and perhaps adopting it?
There's definitely going to be some resistance to change. There's going to be resistance to change with any new technology. Just there might be lack of awareness about AI's potential, and then the resources that people have to be able to take it and run with it. So people are going to be, they might worry about AI replacing their jobs. Well, the key is to show them how AI can make their job more efficient so they can get more things done. So you can actually have more that you can accomplish in your role because AI is just able to help you and just do some more like rote tasks a little bit more efficiently. So I think the key is to be able to, for companies to be able to find the right training programs, find the right way to balance that with teaching them how to use AI, but also showing people specifically in their job what AI can help them with and giving them lots of examples. Because once I see if I know my tasks that I do every day and my things that I'm working on every day, and I don't think that has anything to do with AI, it might just take somebody showing me look at this, you're searching for an email. Just ask Copilot, hey, what email did I send last week to somebody about this topic? And it will just point you to that email. So just little things that you do in your daily work, creating items in a list, creating documents, responding to emails are places where people can get an idea of how it can help them.
Yes. In fact, so my role is also working on either developing or delivering training for some of our customers around Copilot and Power Platform and others. And what you're saying is so true, Laura, because it really resonates with what we're finding where people, it's the blank page syndrome, right? If they have the blank page, if they have the blank canvas, they're struggling there. And what we're finding is actually a lot of the principles that we used around training in the Power Platform applies really well to Copilot, where we used to do hackathons or crowdsourcing ideas or allowing those citizen developers to be able to share their knowledge across the company, power users, has been very helpful in bringing those learnings over. And I'll just remind the listeners, we have both Copilot Lab and many of our first party investments in training, as well as trainers like Laura and other offerings. But we also have a previous episode, Prompt Buddy, that we talked about, which allows you to crowdsource some of those prompt ideas within your organization. And so it's really, really helpful to kind of collect those prompts from an organizational knowledge. I'm curious, do you find, I know you say you don't adapt the training per industry, but do you adapt those prompt lists per industry, or, those samples that you were mentioning, or examples?
I've been using a lot of you all's, the Microsoft Copilot Studio examples. I like to think about, again, I build a lot of business processes. So I like to think about just keep those people's roles, just because we work with a lot of industries as consultants. So it's easy to kind of, since you work with these people in all these different industries and see kind of just what their day-to-day jobs are, it makes it a little easier to be able to put yourself in their place and kind of get an understanding of what they're doing all day. So it helps me when I'm just sort of personally brainstorming examples to use as examples when I do demos and things like that. So just being immersed in the fact that we do consulting every day and work with our customers, and we just have a pulse of what they're doing, that's very helpful. For any given company that's adopting Copilot, it's going to help to get people together and have hands-on workshops and have specific examples in that company, in your own conference rooms, show people specific examples of how they can make their jobs more efficient with Copilot, and then show them real world examples of how it works and how it makes everything you do more efficient, and it's more beneficial to the company as a whole. And you have to follow up with these things and do more interactive trainings, make it engaging, and even have just sort of internal user groups around this to kind of keep people spreading the word and helping each other. And that applies to a lot of, any new technology as well.
So as you've been through this journey, Laura, and obviously technology has evolved, the ability to train online. I know you mentioned you've done this a long time. What do you find is the best training method or platform or format, both maybe just for technology in general, but then specifically around AI? What are you finding to be more successful?
It helps to have, as people are going through a training course, it helps to have nice natural breaks and not just have one big, long, monotonous video. So I try to at least break it down to 5 to 7 minute videos for the attention span concept. And I've been doing more of this lately and try to make it more interesting and interactive and have kind of like things appearing on the screen and more of like diagrams explaining things, but definitely like breaking it up into those shorter videos and then having quizzes and asking them questions and make sure people are retaining things. I've also include little interactive concepts in my training where it'll say click here, click there, and it kind of actually walks them through sort of like a mock-up of whatever that thing is that I'm teaching. And again, it's so funny when you talk about AI training, it's really like a lot of that is the prompts, because the interface in Copilot it keeps changing. Like they keep improving it. So like Copilot videos that are recorded a month ago, now they just released Wave 2. So now it looks a little different. So the way it looks, again, is not really as important as it is with a lot of other technologies, like needing to know where a certain button is and how to get to the settings or something like that. But with Copilot, it's really just know where the box is to type your prompt and kind of have an idea of the best way to structure that. So it's actually much easier with Copilot.
A question around the prompts, Laura. So I think both Wendy and I have OneNotes of prompts that we keep for ourselves. And I think Wendy, you've already mentioned Prompt Buddy, which is a great tool. Shout out to our friends over there, who have created Prompt Buddy. But I'm very curious, do you ever, or does anyone ever think about different scenarios in terms of training, like giving your audience a specific scenario to try and solve when you're actually training and saying, hey, let's use AI. Here's the scenario. Write a prompt to solve X.
That's a great idea. I really like that idea. I need to put more of that. Now, we do have labs where people just go off and they'll work through the lab themselves, and then we'll put a bonus section in the end and say, see if you can achieve this just without instructions. And so that we do have a little bit of that concept in our labs, but definitely having more of like, here's your goal, how are you going to build it? That's a great idea. I haven't done that exact thing though. I like that.
It is something we've been playing around with internally at Microsoft. I attended a training where we talked about the fundamentals, then we had suggestions for how to tweak it so that you can personalize it in your context. I think there's a bit of an evolution, Ken. We are starting to do some hackathons, prompting hackathons, but that is a brand new thing that we're foraying into. And I feel like we're following this journey that we did with the Power Platform. There's actually a lot of overlap in the skill set between low code and artificial intelligence and AI prompting and whatnot. It's really more about, I think, Lori, maybe you've experienced this, and I'd be curious to hear if you have any tips, not just about, okay, can I write a prompt or do I have, that skill set, but how do I think differently about knowing that I need to automate something or write a prompt, or create a Power Automate workflow or something else. I think we get locked into this is the way I've always done it. And maybe that's your hardest boundary. I don't know if you've had experience.
Well, I have ADD, so I get bored really, really easily.
Right here, Laura.
Anything
Right
that
here.
I'm sitting on my desk doing, that I'm like, this is boring. I don't feel like doing this. I just go to AI. Like that's my that's my cutoff. I'll just ask AI how to do this, or I'll just literally just open up Copilot just in Teams and start having a conversation with, I'm trying to achieve this, or what would be the best way to do that, or ask for advice on, like, there's so many different things you can do besides just get it to do something specific very quickly for you, like find something, but you can actually ask it, concept. Like I'm not a marketing person. I have my own company, so I kind of I do my own marketing. I don't traditionally know about how to do marketing. So I'll just have a conversation with Copilot, say, what's the best way to do XYZ, and a lot of small business things. So that's one of the things about AI that I think Copilot that's been hugely helpful, especially for small businesses like me, is that you have so many things that you can get help with that you don't necessarily have the skill set for, like marketing.
I love that you're talking about highlighting the small businesses, and think that, AI helps small, medium, mom and pop shops, if you will, pretty much everybody. And like the tech itself is not just for large enterprises. It can help anyone. Thinking back to something you said when we started the podcast, and that is that you have a SharePoint background. So Laura, I'm going to make an assumption that you know a little bit about security and data and things along those lines. Okay, of course, Wendy, right? No, someone has to ask the question. So a good friend of ours has a few T-shirts, and the T-shirt has images on it. And basically, forgive me, audience, it has a very pretty image of poop, and then it has an image of AI, and then it has shiny poop after that. Right? Meaning that if you put that bad data in, then you get bad data out, except it looks a little better. So I'm very curious, do you talk to organizations and train them on how to maybe structure their data, secure their data? The prompt is only as good as the data that it has access to. What's your method to maybe educating them on the data side of things?
When I think about Copilot and, when you ask Copilot questions in your Microsoft 365 tenant and it bases its answers on your actual data, when I think about the data that it's tapping into, and, companies might worry about the security, and maybe people are having access to things that they shouldn't have access to when AI's doing this. But the thing is, you have to keep in mind that it's SharePoint search or Microsoft 365 search has been around for years. And that's always been a concern with search too. When people can find things they're not supposed to find, that's not any different than Copilot finding things you're not supposed to find. So it's really just a matter of that education in understanding the security behind when you're building your SharePoint sites. Really, I think it's really important that owners of these SharePoint sites, a lot of times people don't even realize they're the owner of a SharePoint site because they created it as a team and it's just there. But I think it's important that companies specifically have a training process for individuals that are going to be the owner of a site. So they'll understand those fundamental site management concepts. I have a whole course called SharePoint Site Management, but it's going to they need to know about the site level permissions, and then the fact that you can have different permissions for different libraries and items, and it can get very messy. But it really should be a matter of architecting your intranet correctly so that everybody's kind of in charge of their own content, but then making sure that the people in charge of each site understand what their role is in securing that content.
So on that, I'm just kind of curious there. Do you have trainings for both IT admins where you walk through that architecting correctly as well as end users, or is it mostly for end users that you're finding? I mean, Ken got his phrase in, so I've got to get mine in, that governance is a team sport. So it feels that you are playing that both sides there, right? Where there's responsibility on the end user as well as the IT admin, and we need to educate them there.
Well, my background is in IT admin, but I named my company Information Worker Mentor, IW Mentor. So I really do focus on information workers and those power users. So I don't have any training on going into the Microsoft 365 Admin Center. I do have a lot of site management training. So when people think about SharePoint admin, a lot of times just managing a site is what they think about. So I do teach a lot about that level, but there's nothing technical you need to know. You don't need to have an admin background or know programming or anything like that to own a site. But there are a few things that I like to include in my training that involve something in the admin center, because I like the power users to know that it's there and to know that even if you're not an admin, there is somebody at your company that is in charge of this, and this is a setting they could turn on, or this is a feature that they can enable, that and kind of show them where it is, so that even if they're not an admin, they can ask an admin. Because there are a lot of things that some admins, some companies, they just like to lock down, just willy-nilly, just lock down things. So for people in companies like that, I like them to know what's possible, even if they can't do it themselves.
I would take us away from governance for just a minute, because I really want to squeeze in this question. I want to go back to the prompting for a minute. What's your favorite prompt? What are some, maybe give us a couple examples of how did this change? And, I know you do Copilot for M365 and Copilot Studio, right? So maybe in a couple different tools, what are some examples or use cases that are your favorites, either personally in the small business setting or to use in training?
Sure. My favorite, one thing that I use all the time is I have a weekly show that I do. I live broadcast. It's called Power Hour. And I do that on Wednesdays, and I broadcast on YouTube. Then I take the video and download it into my OneDrive. And then when it's in my OneDrive, I have Stream and Copilot to be able to get more information about that video. So then I ask Copilot to summarize the video for me. And I get very specific about summarizing it and referring to myself in the first person. There's just like kind of little things that I have to do because I want to write a blog post about that video that I just presented. And I just basically have the AI write the blog post for me as the video summary. So that's something that I do very often. Another thing that I do is when I'm sending out marketing emails, I'll just say, create me an email funnel that has 5 emails that are going to help this person about this Power Apps course that I have. So that's another common thing that I do.
I think I find that, even for myself, I use it for a lot of that, Laura. Like, we just are fresh off the Power Platform conference. In our workshop, our big 8-hour workshop that we had an all-day Ask Me Anything survey going on. And out of that, we collected 159 questions. In the past, what I would have to do is go through all of those questions, read them, understand them, try and then organize them and categorize them, and so on and so forth. But what I did this time was I actually took them all, put them in the Copilot, and then I structured my prompt and asked Copilot to basically break these things out into different types of categories. And I just started having a conversation with it and then asking it to, help me extract what are the problems, what are the pain points, what are customers thrilled about, what are they complaining about, and then so on. From there, that gave me a nice defined list of pros, cons, challenges, and things along those lines. And then that has helped me from a product manager side of things to say, oh, well, now I know that we need to look to invest in this area within the product because customers are telling us that we need more investments here, right? Based upon the data that I've gotten. So I love that AI has accelerated like my journey personally in that particular instance. Yeah, because in the past, I probably would have spent several days trying to do that. And yes, it may not be completely accurate, but it did give me a tremendous head start on building something like that out. So I guess that's, for my own self, a real world example of how I've learned and trained myself to use AI?
I think the train yourself, though, is so important. So I'll maybe chime in with my evolution here. It's become a hobby, right? To write prompts and figure things out. But I think that initially we talk on cell phones, right? We use, short form IMs, and we're not used to, we lost that muscle of long form explanations and instructions. And it's what I found in training is that people latch on to a specific prompt versus understanding the skill set behind it. Hence, to your point, Laura, why the training is so important. And what I'm finding is that sometimes it's in the moment, it takes a longer time to write the instruction. I found that there's value in even just capturing the things I want to automate list or have AI use later, and then scheduling time to do some prompt practice as I build that muscle. And now, to Ken's point, it's second nature. Right now, I'm going to just go to Copilot. I know how to type in and get what I want. But initially, it was a bit of a journey to know, how do I talk to it and what things worked better. And the fact that if you put instruction at the end, it's actually weighted more heavily in the large language model, and you get a different response than some things at the beginning of your prompt. And learning those techniques are super helpful. And so definitely thinking about your work differently, I have found has been the key entry gate, right, to get there on the prompting path.
And maybe one small thing to add for me, Wendy, is that, listening to what you and Laura just said, is that I'm hearing the passion in your voice about educating and training everyone. It's very important for folks to just sort of take the leap and just jump into it. It's not harmful. It's not anything like that. And if you're interested in getting started with prompts, then just actually have a conversation with it. Like, sometimes I will just open a Word document, use Dictate, and just start talking about the topic that I want. And then I'll feed that and say, Copilot, please structure this into a document that makes sense, because I was just rambling on. And I will get some type of, at least logical start to what I was actually trying to say.
I've done something kind of like that when I decide to make like a promo video or something like that. I'll just say, create a script for me. And AI will just write the script. And so I'll kind of have a conversation with it about kind of the way I want to explain and what I want to explain. And I'll say, create a 1-minute script. And it'll just give me a blurb of text that takes 1 minute to say. And
Laura's training me right now. I'm learning a whole lot, right?
I'm learning so much from you too.
I love that, setting a time bounding it and being more specific there. Yeah, and I love your tip. I do that too with the dictation, Ken. We could talk about this all day, and I know there's so much more to cover, so we'll definitely want to have you back on, Laura. But if you could, just as we're kind of landing the plane here, any last either tips or recommendations for our listeners about how they should think about training their workforce? And we'd love to link to some articles or some of your website in our show notes as well.
Just some general tips with getting Copilot adoption, increasing adoption, is that people really need to understand specific things that they do that can be done with Copilot more efficiently. It's really a matter of like translating it to make them understand that it applies to them.
Is there why? I love that. Well, Laura, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and we will have you back on soon.
All right, thanks. Thanks for having me. Good talking to you.